Boruto episode 70, The Other Side of Anxiety. So of course this episode is yet another filler, much like the Chocho like mini trilogy arc. But this episode I really enjoyed. It was much like the Chocho arc where I mentioned, even though all this stuff is filler, technically it still can be utilized, later on in the series, even if they're just, incorporating stuff that's already been done in the manga. Will have a separate sort of context because it's like, oh, we saw this character go through this moment and that moment, and we get a fairly important one, I think, even for what Chocho had, which was really her having like a small moment where it was like, oh, she's normally this person, and then she switches to the insecure person, and then she switches back. And that, that's still an important thing where it's like you have more conviction when you find yourself straying away from, even if it's something, it's your normal path, you find yourself having more conviction when something causes you to, go a different route. And so she went back, so there's more conviction. In this case, it was even more important because with Metal Lee, there's never been anything. There has been no development with this character. I mean, he hardly shows up. Like Iwabe and Denki are more important characters than Metal Lee, and he existed way before they came into play, because I'm still not 100% sure if they've been like somehow integrated into the manga, like they've just been missing or whatever. But he finally got some love in this episode. We get to see Rock Lee, we get to see Guy Sensei come back, so it was definitely cool. Also super funny. Like I love the fact that Guy Sensei is like, he's very mobile. Like his introduction in this episode, I wasn't expecting, because of course with him having the giant fight from Shippuden, which was funny that he didn't remember like Madara's name, but with him having the big fight and his leg being messed up, I thought he was like out of commission completely. But they do it where it's like, he was struggling, but over time, which I thought was super funny. He's like, yeah, I've been doing rehab. I'm like way more agile. And I'm like, he's been doing rehab for like what, a decade and a half now, because his leg was messed up ever since the fight, and that was before they had the kids and stuff. So I'm like, he's been doing rehab for 10 years, 12 years, 15 years, something like that. So I'm like, his leg is gone. Like, it was just funny to me where it was like, hey, he's talking about rehab, and I'm like, well, is he coming back or something? Like, it was just funny to me. I was like, is there rehab for this thing when it's been over, almost a decade and a half? So I thought that was super funny. But he's like jumping off rooftops, and he's like hopping that wheelchair all over the place, which I thought was funny. But it was cool to see him in this episode, and we got to actually see him fight too, which I thought was, once again, very surprising, but pretty cool. We got to see Rock Lee trying to teach his son like the 8 unit gates, and it's like, okay, well, you have this anxiety and you're putting your faith in the medallion. Then he gets like 2 more medallions at the end of towards the end of the episode. So it's like you're putting your faith, basically like your weakness, you're putting it into something else instead of like making it your own and you controlling it. You're saying, all right, well, I'll let this random device be the thing that helps me through the main, like my main weakness. So instead it's like, all right, well, you have to find a way to push through your own anxiety and make something new out of it. So of course he goes through the fight with Guy Sensei, and he loses, but they have that little moment where he does like a nice little spin, and Guy Sensei has to actually dodge a little bit. He destroys Iwabe, like Iwabe just got beat up, so not much really there, but it was a cool little moment. I was like, okay, and I knew what they were going with. Like as soon as he did that, I was like, okay, I know what they're gonna do here. But still enjoyed that sequence. I like the fact that Iwabe was a huge fan of Guy Sensei, because it's like he went through, and it was super funny because I was like, okay, yeah, they're war heroes and stuff, and that makes sense to be fans of them. But then when he told the story where it's like, I know like no ninjutsu or anything like that. I did taijutsu up to the point where I could fight next to Naruto, and everyone knows what Naruto did. And I was like, huh, when you actually say it in that sentence, it's like, that is a huge freaking deal. And I of course already knew that, but I never put it in that context. It's just like, oh, these are the kids that are big fans of the characters. We've seen them do the stuff. So it's just like, it's funny that they're fans. And then when he was telling the story, I was like, actually, that's a big effing deal. Like when he says it like that, like I fought next to the Hokage. Like the Hokage, who you guys have seen do some real weird effing stuff. I can just fight really good. No ninjutsu, no nothing, just taijutsu, and I was able to fight like right alongside him and kind of help us win the Great Ninja War. So I was like, yeah, when you actually tell the story that way, it makes sense why Ube was like such an insane fan of him, and he's like tearing up and stuff, and it's like that actually is a really big deal when you just say it simply like that, in the context of like this is their obviously real world. It's like, yeah, that is a huge freaking deal. It's not like he's, of course, still important. Anyone who could fight alongside Naruto and Sasuke with like OP genetics, yeah, that's a big deal. So it's like, and Kakashi obviously has his stuff, but it's like, this is a dude who has just fighting. He can punch really well and kick really well, and he can open 8 inner gates, and he lived through it. And it's like, yeah, that's a big deal. When you just put it in words like that, and I read it, I was like, I get why, he's not just, one of the other war heroes. That's like an insanely inspirational story, because he was just fighting, like not this and that, punching, kicking, moving pretty fast, and that was pretty much it. So I thought it was really cool, but I like the episode. I like what they did with it. Of course, by the end, Rock Lee has to challenge his son. It's like, all right, I'm going to challenge you. We're going to invite people. If, that's too much for your anxiety, then you can just quit now. So if you beat me and all it takes is one hit, then I will teach you the 8 inner gates, or at least, the beginning steps of that. And we find out that in order for him to, of course, survive, for Metal Lee, he has to take on his anxiety, and that's what he does. And it goes into very akin to Rock Lee doing like the Drunken Master. Still way cooler, in my personal opinion. Metal Lee has like his anxiety style, I guess, or however they're gonna end up titling it, but that's basically his thing, where he utilizes his fear as a part of his moves, where it's just like he's already strong enough, so it's the idea of that strength kind of just being sporadic. So it's like he's freaking out, so he's basically fighting harder so he can end his own embarrassment, but he keeps fighting instead of just freezing up. So he's getting super powerful and stuff like that, and he has so much adrenaline. They mention that he does, of course, leave Hurricane, which is him opening the first gate on his own, because it was just like an insane level of adrenaline with his fear and him trying to fight through it. So that was actually a cool little sequence, and I like the way it looked. It was very stylized, but like I said, as cool as it was, I still think the Drunken Master stuff with Rock Lee is way sweeter, because as much as I like it, it's still him being like freaking out. Like the whole time I was watching it with his faces, and he's just like freaking out and crying and stuff as he's fighting. I was like, yeah, it's still cool, but it would be cooler if he wasn't like freaking out and making this dumb face the whole time, because it's like, it would be a cool action scene. And even though it's good story wise, it's not as entertaining to see it. Like it's one of those weird things that you don't think of until you see it, where it's like, if characters are laughing the entire time they're in a fight scene, it makes the fight scene weird, because it's like, well, that it takes you out of it, because it's not like serious like it should be. And him freaking out the whole time and like screaming like, oh, they're looking at me, and even when they're on his side, it's still him with the freaked out face, instead of him just being confident and kind of stoic because it's a fight. So it took me out of it a little bit. So it was like, all right, plus I didn't think it looked as sweet, because admittedly Drunken Master style is just like one of the coolest things ever. So it was just sweet. Plus we only saw it like 2 or 3 times in the original series anyway, and the first time it was ever introduced is like one of the best fights in all of Naruto, which is Rock Lee fighting Kimimaro. And then obviously it has nothing to do with Rock Lee, but Gar showed up, and I was like, that's one of the best fights in the whole series for me. So it was like, that's still sweeter than Metal Lee's, I guess, anxiety style, or or whatever, but it was still a good episode. I like the way they did it. Much more succinct, of course, than Chocho's thing, and it was far more relevant, because hers was, like I said, it was her being this character, and then she strayed away from that, and then by the end she came back to it with more conviction. That's like a theme of Naruto, admittedly. So and kind of like most anime, really, it's like, oh, this character is always this, and that really tragic thing happens. In Chocho's case, it was a filler thing, so it wasn't a big deal. But still, something happened, and she changed, and then she realized, I have to be myself, and she changed back with more conviction. This was more entertaining because it was an actual departure from, it's like a permanent departure. It wasn't like a full circle thing with more conviction. It was just, I had this, I still have it, but now I've controlled it a little bit better. So I thought it was cool. It was more entertaining. Of course, like I said, seeing Rock Lee actually have a part in the episode I thought was nice, and seeing Guy Sensei in it was actually pretty cool too. So all in all, I did enjoy the episode. Obviously, Metal still gets anxious and stuff. He has the vase at the end, where it's another like priceless artifact. So he gets nervous at the end, and may or may not have broken it to kind of cut beforehand. But I was like, okay, it was a decent episode. Like I said, I personally enjoyed the episode. I like what we got to see. As far as the next episode, I honestly already forgot what the filler was. Like, I honestly watched this episode like maybe 10 minutes before I started this review, and I already, like, the fillers have, the previews have been all for fillers, so none of them stand out unless this turns out to be like an important episode next week. But I already forgot what the the preview was, and I guess because these last couple episodes I just kind of been like, yeah, I know it's gonna be filler. I'm not even like paying that much attention to the preview. It's just like, we'll see what it is. So I legitimately forgot this time. Last time I remember it, like at the last minute, like, oh, it was Metal Lee doing his thing. This time I got nothing. I don't remember who the heck it was about. Oh, I just remember it's bringing back the old dude, the fence sitter guy, who oddly enough, maybe I'm just crazy. I swear he looked taller in this than he did in Shippuden, which is super funny because the whole point was that he was so short. And I was like, he actually looks taller, but maybe it's because he's humped over. It was just super funny. I was like, he looks taller now than when he was already an old guy, but he's like old, which is another thing about this episode. And people even put in the comments, it's like, wow, Guy Sensei aged really well. I was like, he doesn't look any different in any way, shape, or form. Like Kakashi barely looks different, but they kind of have like a little bit that you can kind of see the lines. Um, Obviously, some of the main characters are just older, and they're like full grown adults now, so of course they look older. But the actual adults don't really look like they got 10 and 15 years older than they were back in Shippuden. They almost look exactly the same. And Guy looks completely the same. And Kakashi pretty much looks the same. And I just thought that was so freaking funny. It was like, he really looks like there's like no difference for Guy Sensei. So I thought that was kind of funny how they did it. But looking forward to the next one. We'll see what happens. I don't know if they'll be throwing in any cool flashbacks. I doubt it because kind of the point of Boruto is like, all right, as far as me being like a big fan of all of Naruto, Boruto is like the restart to the Naruto universe, and it's like, all right, well now they have a new generation coming in. Obviously, it's Boruto, Naruto, the next generation. Still dumb, but of course that is for new kids getting into anime, whether it's in Japan or in the U.S. or wherever. So that's kind of how they're doing it right now. And it's like, all right, this is the new generation. So we probably won't get flashbacks to more epic stuff. They'll be like, if they watch it, then they do. But for now, we'll just say this happened. But please watch Boruto. So I don't think we'll be getting any like epic flashbacks. And if we do, it'll be like talking flashbacks. But the five Kage are coming together. That could lead into something. This might be our last filler episode. I feel like it has to be almost with them having the five Kage come together. It's like, all right, that's a huge deal. So I'm gonna be really annoyed if they get together and even what they talk about is like just dumb filler crap. I'm gonna be really annoyed with the episode if that's how like both storylines are. So if at least the five Kage stuff is legitimately important to us for the next arc or maybe whatever they know is gonna happen way later down the line because of the manga, at least in that regard, I'll be like, okay, it's important. So hopefully half of next week's episode is gonna be something useful to us. But should be interesting watching Boruto and the kids interact with one of the older characters, especially now that he's like super duper old. We'll kind of see how that ends up playing out. But like I said, I did enjoy this one, not just because we got some nice nostalgic moments, but it was pretty cool. It was what they did with Chocho, but better and way shorter. So, definitely appreciate that. Like just one nice little episode. And I was really happy it was one episode too, because I think I mentioned that before. Just ready to go. Like every time it happens, you end an epic arc or an arc, there was the movie stuff, they added a couple moments, but you end an arc, ends very well, and then it's like, all right, let's go right into the next one, but anime has fillers, especially, the big ones, so it is what it is, but I'm ready to get to the next arc. So we'll see how it plays out. But of course, I would love to know what you guys thought about this episode. So please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts about it, least favorite parts about it. And since they've decided to do this with two characters in a row with Chocho and Metal Lee, I would love to know what characters you guys would like to get more emotionally focused episodes on. Of course, I would assume it would be the newer characters, but if you want to just see old characters come back, that's fine too. But for me, they've had some before. They did have the one with Ina Jean. Obviously, Sadara had her whole arc that was redone from her one shot. Obviously, Chocho's she had a thing in there too, but obviously the most recent stuff, Metal Lee. I would like to see Iwabe have another episode. Like, he had some important stuff because they were introducing both him and Denki. But I like Iwabe's character. Like, the stuff he's gone through and some of the things they've introduced. Like, the fact that he has the sword and the cane. They've never really talked about that. Like, he had it. That's a big deal. Like, kind of in the Naruto universe where certain characters use very specific things. And the fact that that was hidden for, like, 2 or 3 seasons before he ever used that as an attack. That says something. And, like, I feel like that's a big deal for his character. And that was like the last really big important thing that ever happened to him was him doing that and then them like going through the test. But I was like, I want to see more about Iwabe. I want to know what's going on with him. I don't care about Denki. Admittedly, he can't fight and he's the rich tech kid. I just don't care. Like, it's a ninja show. I don't care about him. I'm sorry, but I want to know more about Iwabe. I want to learn just more about his character as a whole. So I want to see more about him. Anybody else, I don't care. But Iwabe would be my pick personally. I want to see more about his character. But like I said, we'd love to know who you guys would like to have more info on. And of course, I want to know what you guys thought about this episode in general. So please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.